Alright, so in this lecture, I'm going to cover how you go about adding details to a car. In this case, I'm going to address how to go about creating the door handle that goes right here in a car. And by looking at my reference, the interesting thing about this handle is that it actually it kind of follows the same shape as or the same curvature as the door. All right, so it makes sense for me to kind of go in here and rather than using a messy technique like booleans or something like that to actually kind of create that piece out of the actual geometry that's already on the door. Okay, but I'm actually gonna have to go in there and kind of draw this in as well, rather than having to use another piece of geometry to just kind of subtract that. So I'm gonna start by going into my site over here, wireframe, and again you can see that by the way that I constructed my topology, I already have some curvature that's kind of already going to aid me towards trying to accomplish this piece. Okay, and again, that was kind of like initially kind of thought out, so this was kind of already part of the plan. So I'm going to go in here and I'm actually going to draw in what this shape is right here, and so I'm going to go to mesh. I'm going to use the, let's see, the split polygon tool, which again I have in my shelf right here as well. And I'm going to start cutting in this detail right here. And again, it might take me a couple of tries to make sure that it actually does what it's supposed to do. It seems like it's not liking snapping here, but that's fine. Let's try it one more time. Again, I'm using G to just kind of go, I'm pressing enter as I go here because again it's kind of snapping to areas that I don't want to cut. So I want to make sure that I make cuts and they actually stay in place. So for instance, here making a cut here, pressing enter, and pressing G to just kind of go back to my last tool used. And again, I just kind of want to snap some of this detail right here. And if I'm not happy with what it's doing, I can always undo it. Alright, so something along the lines of this, and let's just snap right here. Alright, and again, I'm going to have some issues here because there's I have curvature here that even if I apply the smooth right now, it's not going to be able to create. So I still need to go in there and fix that up. So again, I'm using my split polygon tool and snapping a little bit more geometry in there, so I can actually move that geometry around and make it do what I want it to do. Alright, and then again I need to move this geometry around, and I could use my move tool, but this could potentially maybe deform my geometry in a way that I don't want it to. So I want to make sure that if I am going to be moving my vertices, at the very least I'm going to be using my move settings under normal. Okay, because that way it's moving along the normal of the geometry, not necessarily based on either the object or the world. It's not perfect, but it's going to give you better results than what just your regular settings on the move tool would. Okay, and I want to just kind of smooth it out to see what it's doing. So you know, I am getting some kind of sharp corners here, but I'm just gonna see if again, maybe moving my geometry a little bit around while I'm in the smooth mode could maybe fix that up a little bit. And again, it's not gonna be perfect. Let's just stick to something along the lines of this. Alright. And again, that kind of completed the formant. I probably don't want to stick to that because again, one of the other things that I'm going to do, I'm actually going to detach this geometry right here. So you want to keep in mind the fact that once you do that, again, that's going to fundamentally change how this geometry is going to behave. So again, I already have the shape of my handle there. Just going to go back to this. And again, I can see that even moving stuff around along my normals kind of changed that a little bit, so I want to adjust it before I make any further changes. Alright. And then I want to go ahead, again, I want to make sure that I have nice flowing geometry here. That's very important. And again, notice that everything that I have here is still a four-sided polygons. And you know, if I wanted to go in here and add edge loops and things like that, I could. So that's very important. Alright, so now I want to go in here and I want to extract this geometry from here. Because again, I'm going to be using this as my basis for that door handle. And then I want to go to mesh and I want to extract this. Again, keep in mind that this is a change that you know, you're going to be able to undo here, but it's fundamentally changing what you originally had there in your geometry. So I would definitely advise for again, every time that you do something that's changing fundamentally what you originally did there, to just do a separate save for this. Again, I'm just going to override something that some test that I'm doing. And then I want to come here again and selected these polygons that I want to extract. Just go ahead and extract them. Alright, so now these are two separate pieces of geometry that used to be one. And another thing to keep in mind is that they share the same pivot. And one thing that you want to keep in mind again is your move settings. I changed mine to normal so I could move my vertices along the normal of my geometry, but notice that now my pivots are kind of not there for me to move my geometry if I need to. So just make sure that you need to kind of switch this around to object or world to be able to manipulate it in the viewport. If you keep it under normal, you're not going to be able to do anything to it. And another thing to keep in mind is that this piece of geometry is actually sharing the same pivot point as the original geometry. So when it comes time for me to mirror it, you know, it's going to make things easy for me because it's already at 0 over here. Alright, so now I want to see what this change made to my geometry. And again, I'm doing a 3 here. See, actually nice smooth geometry there. And it's somewhat smooth some of this stuff out. Alright, and again, I want to see maybe my wireframe to see what it's doing. Okay, so I mean, it's just essentially doing what this is doing. Probably needs to be a little bit more curved along these areas. Okay, but I can fix that. But now I want to go in there and maybe start adding some of this kind of details that I have going on here. Alright, and again, for this to work, this is gonna have to be separate pieces. Alright, So again, another thing to keep in mind is that not everything needs to be one piece. You can separate things into separate pieces and add the geometry that those little pieces need to do what they're supposed to do. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. I want to separate these two because I'm going to need to add extra geometry here at the bottom for it to do this indentation right here. So I'm going to select the geometry. Okay. And we're also going to extract this. Okay. And again, I probably want to go into my side viewport and maybe move my geometry around a little bit. And again, I probably want to change this into my normal. Alright. And again, essentially this piece of geometry is not really doing what it's supposed to do. So we're going to have to maybe add a little bit more resolution in here to add the curvature that it needs. Alright. And again, I want to see what this shape over here is doing. Alright. But again, notice the nice thing is that our edges are matching, and you know, it looks like it's a piece that's going to fit correctly. But I'm going to have to add a little bit more resolution in here so I can get some of these nice curvature that, you know, it needs to fit right there. And you know, it's pretty close at this point. Alright, so again, let's go in here and add a little bit of extra resolution so we can add more detail to this piece. I'm going to use the insert edge loop tool here. Okay, and an extra point here is going to allow me to maybe add a little bit more curvature here. Okay. Another thing that I need to keep in mind, again, I have my image planes here. I need to create, this is the indentation that I need to create. So maybe the geometry that I'm going to add, I just need to make sure that it actually kind of matches what I needed to do right here. Alright, so maybe this line I want it to go right here. So again, it's just kind of following what our image planes are showing us. Alright, and I want to add maybe another piece right here, so I can do that. And this one right here, I could either create another one here or maybe move this geometry here. I'm gonna create a new loop right here, but I might maybe change my mind on it later. Again, some of this stuff sometimes can be kind of trial and error. If it doesn't work, just don't fall in love with the idea and start over. Alright. But again, we have enough resolution here that we can actually go in here, maybe move some of these points around, make it fit the way we need to. Alright. And again, I'm probably going to have to add another edge loop here so I can actually close this hole right here. Move this out. Alright, so by adding extra geometry, now we have a much better fit for this piece right here. Probably going to have to add another edge loop here. Down. Okay. And this one seems to be working fine. Alright, so now again, let's just look at our image plane. See where the detail that starts right here and it goes all the way around. So I'm actually going to select this edge right here and I'm going to move it. I'm going to slide it. And again, I want to be using my slide edge tool because it's going to move it along this the normal and that way it's not going to deform my geometry too much. But again, I want to be careful here because I think, let's see. Alright, so I think again, rather than maybe create another line right here, I think I'm just going to stick to what I had there originally. So again, this was a choice that I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to keep, so I kind of decided against it at this point. I'm actually going to, again, just select this edge right here and use my slide edge tool, slide it where I need it to go, somewhere around here. Okay, and I probably want to go ahead and add another line right here so I have a nice so I can actually close some of this stuff over here. So it's probably a better solution than what I had there originally. And it's already normal, so I can just kind of bring this down a bit. Okay. Alright, so and it looks like we have now the geometry we need for this. And again, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to stick to this and just maybe move my geometry around as I need after I create the indentation. So I'm going to go ahead and select these polygons right here. Alright, and I'm going to extrude them in. Alright, and again, notice that I'm kind of doing all these changes as I have my smooth preview on, and that's because I want to see what those changes are doing to my geometry. Okay, because if we're in this mode, we're not really seeing what it's going to do when it subdivides, which is a mistake. Again, you want to learn to be kind of working in this preview mode, so you understand what the changes that you're making to your geometry are eventually doing to the final model that you're creating. Alright, so again, notice that again, we create an indentation here, and it has some interesting curvature right here, not necessarily where we need this to be at this point, but let's see, it has some nice kind of flowing curvature and just kind of goes in like this. But notice that it's really sharp at this edge. So again, that's something that I'm going to have to kind of have to add resolution here to be able to create that. And again, in order to create sharp edges, what I have to do is go in there and add more resolution close to this edge right here. So I'm going to use my insert edge loop tool. And again, I'm getting a preview of what this is kind of doing as I'm doing it. Alright, so I'm getting some nice sharpness right here, but it needs to be kind of more straight here at the edges. There's a couple ways that I can go about fixing this. Let's see, let's just go back to this. One thing that I can do is actually get rid of this geometry right here, because again, this is supposed to be a handle, so the person's kind of supposed to stick their hand in. It's supposed to be a hole in there, and if I get rid of this geometry, it's going to fix some of this kind of curvature that I got going on here. It might not, but I'm assuming it will. Alright, so by just deleting those edges that I don't need, notice that it's already kind of doing the type of curvature that I need to do there. Alright, same here. Alright, so this seems like a pretty good solution for me to maybe just kind of leave it like that. I could, again, if I want to maybe fill in this geometry right here, I could definitely go in there and kind of straighten it up a little bit more, maybe move up my geometry and stuff like that. I could also give this piece a little bit of depth, again, because right now it's kind of a little bit flat. But essentially this has the shape that that my reference is showing, which again it's just like a little bit of sharpness here, and then a really smooth indentation. And again, I can go in here, maybe move my geometry a little bit around so it looks a little bit more like what my reference is showing. And again, I'm not going to be able to move these edges around if I keep this in normal. I need to make sure that I change it back to world, or I can use the slide edge tool. But again, for the purposes of this, I don't need to kind of slide it against the edge. I kind of need to move it up so I can kind of keep some of this curvature. So this works really well right here. Alright, and one of the issues that we're having right now is that my computer just froze. Alright, thank you. And again, I want to save at this point just in case my computer crashes, because it probably will. And notice that when we kind of zoom out from this, we can't really tell that there's anything right there. I mean, we know that the cuts that we did are there, but we can't really tell what's going on, and the reason is because we haven't given it any sort of depth. Everything's just kind of, the geometry is really matching really well here. So it just looks like it's still one piece. So we need to give it a little bit of depth so we can actually bring in some a little bit more definition to this piece. And again, by doing that, it's going to kind of take care of some of these kind of hole spaces that we have here. And we have to do it in both places, both in the door. I have to give it a little bit of depth on that hole that we created, and we have to give the pieces that we extracted a little bit of depth as well. So again, rather than extruding maybe a hole to give the size of this door depth, rather than extruding all the faces, I just extrude the edges down. I want to pretty much do the same thing with this. Okay. Alright. And again, my file's kind of slowing down a little bit now, so I'm going to do a save and just kind of maybe start it again. So I'm going to pause this for a second. Alright, so I restarted my Maya, so it's not slowing down anymore. And again, now I want to start maybe adding a little bit of depth to these pieces of detail, so we can actually tell that they're not part of the door anymore. So I want to go to the door and actually select the edges from the geometry we extracted, and I want to go in there and extrude that in a little bit. But again, keep in mind that any change that you make like this is going to add some, is going to change fundamentally what's happening there. And Maya is going to kind of try to interpret, the changes that you're making. So by extruding this in and not having enough geometry to tell Maya that this is supposed to be sharp, it's going to create this kind of weird indentation that we have here. So we got to go in here and we got to add more resolution so it keeps the shape that we need. Alright, and again, notice that if I gotta be careful with this because I have some kind of collapse in geometry in here. I'm just gonna fix this up a bit. Just gonna stick to moving this one. Alright, and this stuff inside doesn't have to look super pretty. Again, this is not something that's going to be in camera view, but at least you want to keep it flowing, the geometry flowing, so you can go in there and add more detail if you need to. Again, like in this case, we just added an extrusion, and it's kind of creating a weird curvature here, so it means that it needs more resolution in there to keep some of that sharpness. So I'm going to go in here, edge loop tool, and I'm going to add a loop that goes around here. Alright, and again, notice that by adding depth to this hole right here, we can already tell that there's a detail there that it wasn't there before. And again, I want to do the same thing with these pieces. And again, this one is a little bit irregular, so I have to be careful how I extrude this stuff out. I'm going to start by adding details, to add depth just to this edge right here, not everything. So So I want to make sure that I deselect everything else. Okay, and again, adding an extrusion or depth to this is going to fundamentally change what's happening here. So we need to add more resolution for it to sustain the sharpness that we had there originally. So, alright. And again, this geometry collapsing in here, not a big deal because it's not something that's being viewed by the camera. But you can definitely go in there and clean that up if you wish to. And again, I'm gonna go in here and just add another extra edge loop here, so we can keep the detail. All right. So that's looking really nice. And same thing with this one. Alright, and that way we're kind of addressing whatever hole we had here at the bottom of our geometry. And again, we need to have more resolution here so we can kind of keep some of that sharpness. Alright. And now we have a door handle for our car. That was made from what the original geometry that we had here. And again, it's really cool because, you know, it's actually following this nice sharp edge that I had going on the side of the car. So it's just kind of, it really flows really nicely. The next thing that I like to address is again, how to start once you get to a point where you have enough detail in your car, and then you need to start kind of mirroring things, because again, we're only working on half of the car, so then we can just kind of mirror the other piece of geometry, because basically, you know, it's a symmetrical object. So mirroring something like this is kind of very straightforward. Again, I need to make sure that I change my move settings. Alright, and because all of these stuff was started from splines, you know, and you were kind of drawing things out from the orthographic viewport. Everything that you created is already at this point. All the axes are at 0. So in order to mirror this, I need to do a couple of things just to make sure that it mirrors correctly. Because even though our pivot point is already at 0, 0, 0, we need to make sure that our vertices are kind of in the correct position as well. And again, because we created everything at 0, 0, 0, all of the geometry that I have here should be kind of aligned to this axis. But during the transition between surfaces to polygons, some things might have changed. So again, I need to kind of go in there and maybe revise some of this stuff a bit. And I'm at the bottom here, so I need to make sure. Okay, stick to this. Alright. So, you know, first look at this, it actually doesn't look that bad. Alright, so, you know, we can assume that all of these vertices are already in the right position. And again, to mirror this, all I have to do is go to Mesh, go to Mirror Geometry, and I want to look at my options. Because again, this kind of all depends on the location of our axis. So again, we want to make sure that we're mirroring on the right and the correct axis. So again, to check this, I mean, I know already that it needs to mirror on the x-axis because this is, you know, my right axis. I know it's the x one. And you know, if I move it, I know that it's translating on my x. Okay. And I also know that it needs to go in the negative, because if I move my object on this direction, you know, it's moving in a positive direction. Alright, another thing that you want to make sure of at this point, and before you do any, before you mirror this, make sure that you've gone into modify and you freeze transform your object, so everything in your channel box is pretty much at zeros. Okay. You also want to go into your delete by type and make sure that the history is deleted. Okay. Because you don't need, if this is ready to be mirrored, that means that there is no extra modifications that you need to this model. It's just ready to be mirrored. So again, I have a couple of things going on here. I don't need all this stuff, so I just want to make sure that I don't need that information, so I'm just going to get rid of it. So I'm here. On my mirror direction, again, I already established that it needs to mirror on my negative x-axis. Okay, and I want to make sure that it's merged with my original and it's merged with the vertices. So then I just want to go ahead and click on apply. Alright, and again, notice that first it's not, and I'm going to hide my planes here because they're in the way. For the most part I did a pretty good job at mirroring this, but I'm having an issue right here. Okay, and I could, now that it's one object, I could go into it and kind of fix the geometry myself, but again, that could be somewhat of a painful process, and it could potentially change the shape of your object. So if you don't have to touch it, it's better if you don't. So make sure you go into your channel box and go into the mirror that you just applied. Okay, and again, this pretty much tells you what it's doing, which is, it mirrored on the negative x-axis and it actually merged your vertices. But we want to play around with the merge threshold, because that's what's doing this, and it just means that it might be a little bit too much. So I want to go in here and maybe change this to a 0.5. All right, and again, notice that that was a little bit too much, so I want to increase that a bit. And if I go to 8, still 0.08, it hasn't done anything. Let's do 7. All right. So I could keep playing around with this, but it's not going to give me the right solution that I want. So it makes sense that rather than me playing around with the settings, I understand that there's a problem there, that it's in the original piece of geometry and that needs to be addressed before I mirror this piece of geometry. Okay. So we know that there's something along this that's not working properly, that needs to be aligned before we mirror it for this to work right. And again, I want to hide this. So I'm going to go into my top viewport. Okay, and again, for the most part, everything's kind of already somewhat aligned to that, to my grid here. But it's not perfect. The fact that it's not aligned here to my grid at 0, this is what could be causing the fact that this part is not closing properly. So I want to make sure that all these vertices are aligned this grid right here, that 0 line that we need kind of everything at for to work correctly. So I'm going to be using my move tool. Alright, I'm just selecting this. I'm in my orthographic top viewport. You don't want to do this in a perspective. It's not going to work. And you want to make sure that you're snapping your movements to the grid. Okay, so basically I'm going to select these and just kind of move them down, and again, notice that it's just kind of snapping everything to that line. You could try and kind of selecting everything and try and see if it actually does it, but sometimes that gives you really weird results. It makes more sense to just kind of, especially for something that's supposed to be precise like this, to just kind of go in there and kind of do it yourself. you know, as long as your geometry is not too dense, the process of just kind of aligning all your vertices is not that painful. Okay. And again, we're having some. Alright. And again, I just want to do a last kind of run through, make sure that everything's aligned. Okay. And another thing that I want to do, again, at this point, after I align everything, I want to make sure that none of my vertices were actually snapped to the grid, because that's something that could also happen. So again, you want to make sure that you don't do that as soon as it happens, otherwise, you know, it could be trouble. So I went in there and I aligned my vertices to, you know, 0 here, and let's try and mirror this out again. See what happens. All right, and again, it seems to be like we're having the same problem, but again, let's just go and okay, when I undid everything, it kind of undid my delete history, but it's not really a big deal right now. You know what, actually, just to make sure that all I have to deal with is the mirror, make sure that I delete the history. Okay, and again, I'm going to apply it one more time. And I'm just gonna play around with my threshold to see if it fixes this problem. If not, I gotta go back and see what is causing this. All right, and that's a little bit too much. I'm going to go down. All right, and again, by just lowering the threshold by 0.05, it is now mirrored correctly. Okay. So again, the process is making sure that one, your freeze transform, transformation. So make sure it's freeze transform, so everything here is at zeros, and scale at 1. That's correct. Again, the idea is that if for some reason you need to move your geometry or whatever, even if you rotate it, all right. If I need to put it back to where it's supposed to go, all I got to do is go in here and type zeros. And it's set perfect where it needs to fit. All right. Second thing, again, delete the history, so you're not dealing with anything that you don't need. All right. And again, sometimes just it's good for your geometry to not kind of depend on any of that stuff anyway. So again, if you're already done with the model, get rid of the history and just have whatever it is that you need right there. Third step, again, go in here, make sure that especially if it you know, make sure that everything is aligned at, you know, at 0, and when you mirror it, then what you got to make sure of is that your threshold is not too high, otherwise it could distort the geometry a little bit too much. Okay, so the last thing you want to do again when you mirror things is to go in there and kind of fix that stuff manually, because it is going to change what you had there originally. Okay, and essentially to finish the car, all you got to do is kind of the same procedure with every piece that has a similar aspect, such as this one. You know, this one is another one that you would mirror the geometry, and this piece is right here, and this one. But what about pieces that are not connected, such as the door? All right, and again, it helps that we actually created everything with splines, and everything kind of has a pivot point at 0, 0, 0. So, you know, as long as it hasn't moved, because again, sometimes we have to kind of move the geometry around to make things fit. And again, I'm going to my top viewport to make sure that it's where it's supposed to be, and it is. All right. Then all you got to do, it's a duplicate special to kind of mirror it on the other side. All right. And this is how you do it. You select the geometry, you go to edit, you go to duplicate special, all right, and you want to click on the options. You don't want to click it as is, because you want to make sure, you want to know what it is that it's doing. uh, you want to do an instance, because again, if you need to go back in here and do any changes to this geometry, it'll actually do them on the other side as well. All right. All right, and then the other thing that you gotta do again is make sure that you are aware to what axis it needs to be copied. It's going to be transferring over. So just like this piece of geometry, this one's actually needs to be transferred over on the x-axis, and because it's the opposite side, it's the negative one. So I don't want to mess with the translate and rotate. I actually want to change the scale. By default, everything's at 1, 1, 1. If I make the scale at -1, how to explain this? Okay, at 1, by having the axis here, this is a scale 1 on the x-axis. If I change this to a -1 on the x-axis, it actually gonna flip it. And again, allow me to demonstrate. So notice that by just doing a -1 on the x-axis, it just kind of flipped it on the other side. All right. So I need to make a duplicate special that's just instance on the negative axis for it to fit on the right position. So that's basically what I'm going to do here. I'm going to add a -1 on the scale x. I only need one copy, and then I just apply. All right. And again, it works perfectly because my axis was right here at 0, 0, 0. Okay. And I can do the same thing with these pieces of geometry, because again, they were extracted right out of this, so they share the same pivot. So if I want to make a copy of this handle, an instance of it, so it fits right here perfectly where this hole is, I just need to apply that again. Alright, and any piece that's, like this one, again, this one is already, again, it was drawn spline, so the pivot was at 0, 0, 0. I can go in here, make sure that it's actually at 0, 0, 0. It looks like it is. If for some reason it isn't, for my laptop, I'm doing function insert. If you're using a Mac, it's the home key to move around your pivot, and then you just want to make sure that it's snapped to the grid at 0, 0, 0. So again, if it wasn't here, I would just kind of do that and just snap it to the center right here. I would get out of the edit pivot function here. Alright, want to make sure that it's not snapping anymore, and then I would just same thing, do an instance that's scaled on -1 in the x-axis, and then apply, and it gives me an exact piece that's mirrored on the other side. Alright, but again, one of the things that you got to keep in mind is that this is not going to work for everything. You got to make sure that you're mirroring on the right axis. Okay, I believe, let's see, this one's on the x. Let me try mirroring this one. And again, if I wanted to mirror this stuff right here, I would select it, and I will make sure that everything's sharing the same pivot at 0, 0, 0. But I know for a fact that the tire is not. Alright, so again, I want to make sure that I snap that into, doesn't necessarily have to be at the center, but it has to go along that 0 axis line. So again, function, just to move my pivot around, I want to make sure that I'm snapping to the grid. Now it's along this 0 line. Get out of this, turn off my snap. Alright, and it looks like it's on the x-axis, so if I wanted to mirror that tire on the other side, again, I apply that, but it didn't. It looks like it was the x-axis, but I believe for this one it's the y. So again, I'm going to select it, I'm going to change the negative x scale to the negative y right here, and I apply that, and now I have that on the other side. So the other aspect of it is just making sure that you know what's the correct axis to mirror from. All right, and once you apply that to the car, and as long as you have depth and detail, you can get to this point. All right. All right, and that concludes the demonstration.